Thank you. Representative Christiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have to agree with Representative Parker about the cowardness and anonymity behind cyberbullying and needing to have stricter punishment for those that bully kids. I mean, even within the General Assembly, we have a member of the General Assembly that was doing that to their own constituents, and I think it's disgusting that it happens, and I think there needs to be strict punishments to stop that. But I would like to get back to more about the external threats to our children. You had a lot of recommendations about internal threats and how to work on internal threats, but this committee was formed in response to Sandy Hook, an external threat to children, and I didn't see in your testimony much about external threats. And in your opinion, are the schools, from a capital improvement standpoint, are they fairly safe in the Commonwealth? I mean, you made no recommendations of the needs to increase the facility, safety and security of the facilities and needing capital funds, but the previous testifier did say that we need more security equipment, such as cameras, secured entrance systems, staff training. In your opinion, are the public schools in Pennsylvania have adequate capital expenditures for facility?
I think that it's different from every school to school, right, and every school district to school district, and that's part of the recommendation that we put forward of working with the local law enforcement. Every school building is different, so they're going to have different needs in terms of entry points or what's the best way to get somebody to the front office, and what's the physical. What are the physical dangers right around the school? That's all different, and that's where working with the local law enforcement and working with the school safety team at the individual site can make a determination about that for themselves and for the school itself. So, yes, there are a lot of schools within Pennsylvania that have very great supports in place, that have, the physical aspects of safety that we normally think of, whether they be resource personnel or cameras in the hallways and things like that. But it's certainly always important for every school to review that on a regular basis with individuals that have knowledge in the area, and to make a determination for the individual school building, because every building is different.
I guess, but you didn't answer my question. In Europe, for PSEA not to put it in here that there's a need for capital improvement funding for facility protection must mean that, in your opinion, the schools are pretty safe. I mean, that's not even in this recommendation, and I think the facility safety is one of the most important things to protecting our kids, right? Making sure that an outside threat isn't able to just walk through the door, correct?
Oh, absolutely. But again, just because it's not specifically stated the way that you're stating it doesn't mean that it's not in here. Okay. Again, indicating that we believe in creating the school safety committee and working with local law enforcement. Determinations about the physical state of schools is for the local individuals to be making, because every school is different and every school building is different. It's very difficult to make a blanket statement about all of the schools in Pennsylvania.
Okay, so there may be things that we can do to increase the facility safety from a facility standpoint. And definitely you mentioned the need for increased staff and increased training. How in your mind, in the recommendation doesn't say how we would fund that. Can you do that with already appropriated funds, or would you need increased funds to do that?
One of the as we supported with Senator Scarnati increasing that the school safety grants and that program, I think obviously is extremely important, because those things do take funding. But the reality is, we want our children to be safe.
Sure.
We want the students to be safe, and if there are ways that we can work within the resources that we have, yes, there are ways that we can. Are there other things that we believe there could be that, if there is funding available, should be there? Absolutely.
Sure.
And the reality is, when when budgets are tight, the first ones to go in the school are those first line defenses of school counselors, school psychologists, school social workers, and they are extremely important. And so, yes, maintaining them would mean maintaining funding.
And we would probably agree that the $6 million increase, while it's a nice gesture, probably doesn't even scratch the surface of the needed funds. I guess my frustration then is if clearly we need funds for capital improvements, for security measures and security upgrades, we need increased funding for staff training, emergency management planning, student assistance programs, truancy intervention programs, bullying prevention programs, and school climate training. We need funding for all of that. Why in the world on January 30th, when the governor first rolls out a plan for the sale of the wine and spirits stores, and the $1 billion that the Commonwealth would receive from that, from the very beginning, the president of PSEA, Mike Crossie, says that, quote, we need to restore the $1 billion of education cuts made by the governor, Corbett. We could argue about federal stimulus and whether or not that's a state cut. And he said plans to privatize the liquor stores have failed in the legislature every time they've been attempted in the last 3 decades. And he says, and rightly so, I don't know why in the world, if there's $1 billion out there and the governor wants to put the #1 priority to school safety funding, which we would agree we would need, why would the president of PSEA say that rightly so, every plan in the past has failed? I think it's short-sighted on his part. I think it sends the wrong message. I think he should revisit the fact that we need $1 billion and shouldn't interject his opinion on whether or not this is a good program or not. Because we just heard from people earlier that would love to secure their facilities and increase programs and need the funds to do it, and they don't have it. I mean, can you just maybe respond to why in the world the president of your organization would stand in the way of $1 billion going towards something like this?
Thank you. Just please identify yourself.
Good morning. My name is Beth Zamponia. I'm the Assistant Director of Government Relations for PSEA. Chris is certainly our in-depth policy expert on everything that our schools and our members are doing in terms of improving school safety, but not necessarily as engaged in terms of the various political and policy discussions that are happening in Harrisburg. So in terms of responding to your question, Representative Christiana, our organization believes that these programs, school safety and the others that were referenced in the Passport for Learning, early childhood education, et cetera, are critically important, and they deserve ongoing built-in structural funding in order to accomplish that objective. It should not be one-time allocations in terms of the state commitment to these programs, and that was primarily the driving force behind PSEA's policy decision to oppose the Passport for Learning proposal. There are other issues that likely are not necessarily pertinent to this committee that also weighed in terms of our recognition of the current LCB structure as an ongoing financial asset for the Commonwealth in terms of revenue. PSEA has been more and more engaged in the revenue conversation, if you will, but I don't know that that's particularly germane at this time. So I just wanted to offer that response.
I guess my follow-up would be there's a difference between one-time expenditures and expenditures that would have an expense in years 4, 5, and 6. And I think it's important that we look at capital expenditures that are a one-time expenditure as opposed to those that are reoccurring and have an expense over time after time after time. I would say that we would fund them appropriately. I think it would have been much more appropriate for the president of your organization to say that he doesn't believe paying for reoccurring expenses with one-time pot of money is not appropriate and not responsible long-term, but he didn't say that. Instead, he says, it's nice that the governor has acknowledged that he created a school funding crisis. Doesn't seem like to me that that's really the conversation from the very beginning of working together to find a way to, responsibly fund capital improvements that are one-time and reoccurring expenses. And I think that was misguided on his part.
We can certainly relay that to President Crossie. We are not sitting here today to
Understand.
necessarily debate his statements. However, I think what I said before in terms of the ongoing built-in funding is a key driver in the conversation. And I do think that PSEA as an organization has engaged in all of the efforts from funding to specific policy recommendations, and we do want to work together as a key stakeholder. And for this in particular, improving the safety and security of students in Pennsylvania, and also our members in terms of, thank you, the first responders commentary is very appropriate, and we appreciate hearing that. So.
And I agree with you. I think this is a long-term, multi-pronged approach. I don't think a one-time pot of money is going to solve the problem. I don't think that internal threats can only be looked at. I think we have to look at external threats, many different ways to help alleviate the possibility of a threat. And there's nothing we can do nor you can do to completely eliminate that threat. I understand that. And that's why I don't think when there is a significant conversation about a one-time source of money that the president of the largest teachers organization in the state should be so combative and interjecting his personal feelings about the issue. Rather, we should be working together to solve this because it's important to you all in the safety of your members and to the kids of our district and the families of our district. And I don't think we should take anything off the table at this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.